I believe one of the least spoken topics that I believe should be spoken about more, and I think it's just because nobody's willing to speak about these things, because they think that they can't, is the relationship between men and women, masculine and feminine. Look, it's no shock to anybody here, but these things are now crazy questions that people need to ask themselves because they're just so arbitrary. People don't even know what it means. What does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And I realize that actually we've become disconnected from the overarching stories that allow us to understand ourselves as men and as women. So what I really wanted to get into today is really about exactly what is this affecting? And I said, well, the problem is that there's no ideals anymore. There's a rejection of a few things, and I'll tell you what those things are. Well, that only happens in a collapsing society, which we are currently in, and it's no shocker. You don't need me to tell you that. The rejection of masculine and feminine roles that are embodied. For the masculine as fatherhood, husbandhood, and brotherhood. And for the feminine it is motherhood, wifehood, if that's a word, and sisterhood. These three things are exactly the archetypes and the ideals that we should be striving towards. Now let me explain the problem with a society that does not have an ideal system. Remember, if you remove God from a society, it just collapses instantly. And I'll tell you why, because there's never an ideal. Now for the man, what's the ideal? The divine masculine. For the woman, what's the ideal? The divine feminine. What is that composed of? It's a list that is so big. And of course, you grow up, you have traumas. And as men, it makes you run away from life. Feminizing by nature. And as women, it makes you masculinized. Now, do you understand the dangers of a world where somebody's not really trying to tell you the difficulties of what it is to be connected to your masculinity as a man, and perhaps the difficulties of what it is to be connected to your femininity as a woman? Now, what ends up happening is these things create insecurities. These insecurities start to create resistance to us trying to be the most authentic version of ourselves. We have to understand that we live relative to these ideals. No matter which way you cut it, if you want to find love, you need to make love to the ideal. I promise you. Well, why is that the case? And I'll tell you. There's a certain point where you need to accept that the masculine ideal in fatherhood, if not connected to what makes you masculine, your fatherhood in one way or another, perhaps not your own children, but perhaps in the business that you run, you are still providing guidance, you are providing reassurance, you are giving stability, you are protecting, you are providing. And as a woman who embodies the mother, you are endearing, you are loving, you are tender, you are influential, you are inspiring, you can instill with belief. And all of these things are not being spoken about. And the worst part about it is that we're paying for it as men and women. The thing that's really not happening now is that there's not a lot of compassion or understanding that these journeys are long journeys to take and may take the rest of your life. Not everybody has a beautiful family. Not everybody has ideals to look up to. Not everybody has strong fathers or strong mothers. And these things can be really hurtful to see in today's society. But I want you to understand that if you can't work towards those things, then what are you working towards? If the horizon is a career and divorced in your 40s, which is, by the way, most people's modeling life, that's just the life that most people are provided nowadays. Or perhaps maybe there's a relationship with yourself to where you can have a connection to being a father, you can have a connection to being a husband, and for women, that you can feel connected to being a mother and being a wife. And you're telling me that that's not where your fulfillment's going to come from? It absolutely is. Nobody wants to tell you that because it sounds kind of politically correct, but I want to let you know that every single story and every single movie that you've watched that has inspired you has been in touch with the divine masculine and divine feminine archetypes. Beauty in Beauty and the Beast is a representation of the feminine divinity. Why? Well, she's embodied what? Beauty, which is the highest form of being for a woman. What does beauty look like? It looks like being able to look a beast in the eye and be able to understand that there was once a prince locked away. She's willing to fight and struggle with the darkness of man and to bring the best out in it. If that's not what beauty is about, then I don't know what is. She utilizes all of her gifts and all of her abilities, which are influence, the ability to guide somebody towards their highest intentions. It's not manipulating them, it's influencing them. It's the acceptance that she gives him, not saying he needs to be a prince in order to get love. And of course, the last one, the embodiment of beauty. The embodiment of beauty itself. Those things are in a state of being. It does not call for attention. It inspires the individual. That is now lacking in today's society. The feminine role nowadays is a chick in leotards with nunchucks, thinking she's a dude. Most women were praying to God that they have cocks. And it's not because they actually want that. It's because they've been hurt before. Now, there's a society that is made by men as a whole that would love as many working individuals as possible. The destruction of the feminine ideal, I'll get into first, because we'll start with the ladies, and then we'll go into the destruction of the masculine ideal in relationship to the destruction of the feminine ideal, because it starts with women. So how can we fix these things? And I believe it's a question to be constructive about. It's about realizing that you feel resistance to it, not because there is a patriarchy that's burdening you. It's because it's damn difficult to achieve. That's why. Sleeping Beauty is another story, for example. It's about female darkness, embodied in Maleficent, and the suppression, I guess you say the overbearing father who hides his daughter and destroys every possible threat to her, making her, of course, you know, the most susceptible to random strangers lolling around in the woods. And who does she bump onto? She bumps into a prince, lucky enough for her. But also, what ends up happening at that point is that, you know, this prince has to realize that he can't just fall in love with the picture-perfect princess. It's that she comes with a dark side that looks like the dragon of chaos, so he's going to need to be equipped, and he's not ready yet. He needs truth, and he needs virtue. And this is another thing that people aren't telling you, which is that masculine and feminine work in harmony together. They are not separate entities. There's no parade of just men going together, going men, 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 and women going, way, look at us. It does not exist. That is a product of a society that does not want you to be strong collectively. We are strong together. We are weak apart. And we are promoting more ego to distance ourselves so that we think we have our own light. No, it's the accumulation of our light that allows the transformation of it. So the Sleeping Beauty story, he finally is able to slay the dragon, and he's able to kiss the Sleeping Beauty and wake her up. And the kiss is supposed to be the unifying moment by which they come together under the basis of truth. They've fought, he struggled, he's become a man in the process of that. And she's become a fully actualized woman, no longer running away from the parts of herself, but accepting that as men and women we do this together. The reason why the suppression of these roles is just so convenient is because it so often helps the people that are pushing those narratives. They would love that idea, that they can destroy, I guess you could say, the feminine in its beauty, to get it to do the things that it wants to do in a man-made society, whether you like it or not, it is. Every moment that a woman engages with the society, she is masculinizing herself. And sure, you might go, well, it's very important in a world where men are so weak. We'll get into that in a second. Because yes, there's a lot of male weakness, and this has created a lot of what we see nowadays. And now for men, I think the best way to understand men and women as a whole, as an archetype, is in the Adam and Eve story. The Adam and Eve story will shine a lot of light on this. Well, I think, you know, for starters, Adam is going to be, you know, the man. He names all the creatures. He's the gardener. He keeps order and protects it. And he's there to provide for his wife and his partner. And then, of course, you have Eve on the other side of things, who is in an opposing force to Adam, meaning that it's in support of him, either in resistance or in, as you could say, yeah, in support, as in it's going to be providing in a list of ways in a passive sense, opposed to an active sense, which is more masculine. You know, we understand all of these things. You know, you say yin and yang and everybody applauds, but then you talk about what it looks like in a practical world and everybody goes, that's oppression. And it's like, you could take it up with God. I promise you. Like, because if there's a certain point where me being a man is exhausting, it is. Who do I point the finger at? And so that's the perfect story about Adam and Eve, you know? Where's the downfall of them? Well, you need to know a lot about male nature and female nature and understanding that the masculine and feminine archetypes come with things, you know? I'm thinking about how this story is relevant, but I do believe that they are in deep relationship to what we're talking about, is that they are exactly ideals, but I want to show you the flip side of those ideals and what it looks like. And that's why I'm bringing it up, that these archetypes do come with flip sides. For Eve, there was something very interesting, is that she's connected deeply to the serpent, and the serpent tells her the one thing that she's most susceptible to. People need to understand these things about women, and this is actually what I'm going to say before I say this story, which is you need to understand that if you do not know who you are and what your purpose is, you will become suggestible to men that are more convicted than you and will tell you who you are, and you will be a slave to them. And as women, I'm sorry to break it to you, you are going to be either used and abused by men that do not care about you, or you will be protected and loved by men that love you. And those men that will love you are typically going to be your father, your husband, and your brothers. And those will be the men that will fight for you. And every other man that is telling you anything else other from what I'm going to say right here, which is going to trigger you, is that you need to know who you are so that you're not manipulated and controlled by everybody else who's saying that there's a better alternative. We'll start with Eve. Still starting with ladies yet. We'll get to men in a little bit. She's susceptible to the snake. What's the snake? It's a representation of a seductive narrative that's what? Going to tell her something that's going to make her feel more safe. That's the idea of seduction, right? If women don't know this about themselves, well, you're going to be seduced by snakes, and you're going to spiral out all of humanity as we know it. So, you look the snake in the eye, and the snake has this conversation with you, and it tells you all of those sweet lies. You could be just like God if you eat from the fruit. There's additional security beyond the security that's given to you from God and your husband. Ooh, that gets every damn woman. And then what ends up happening, she eats from the fruit, right? Because there's additional security. So it's playing into the feminine aspect that all women are looking for. Security. If you can't accept that you need it and that you're looking for it, you'll have men tell you how to get it in a way that serves them, where they don't care about you. They don't host you. They don't house you. They don't love you. They don't protect you. They exploit you because they can. And you're just another person that's willing to follow the things that they're willing to say. And you're forgetting that we live in a dark world The world of gulags and concentration camps was not so long ago. And we think that now that all of those things have disappeared, that's not true. These stories are good and these archetypes are us, and we have to identify with them so that we understand where we are relative to it. And now here he goes. We could put Eve aside and let's talk about Adam. This is the masculine archetype. Adam, and this is for all men, and this is what has feminized all men. Their fear of responsibility and their ability to confront their woman. This is crazy. And being able to say, no, honey. Most men lack principles. And the thing that most men are afraid of is responsibility. It was really easy for him. And I'd say even the last thing that most men are afraid of is the truth. They run away and they turn a blind eye. The male archetype is actually embodied in cyclopses, or even you could even take the penis, for example. It's a one-eyed monster, right? You are blind. You know, even in another one-eyedness is Seth in the Egyptian archetypal stories. There's this notion that men are kind of one-eyed. So you're telling me that Adam wasn't one-eyed to Eve when she came with the exact fruit that God specifically told him. Do you understand that? God told him not to eat from. There was a perfect rationale, and it was so damn easy to look away because all he needed to do is, oh, she's the woman God made for me. I don't need to be there to protect her. That's the little boy. That's the running away from responsibility. That is the thing that hurts all men. And there's ways that have done that have deteriorated the masculine role as a whole. There are two things that are going to be really frustrating for men. Fatherhood and being a husband. I promise you. If there are two things that are going to grow men, it's going to be fatherhood and being a husband. Why? Both of them require responsibility and an extensive amount of internal work to really, and I mean this, to really be a good father and a good husband. The reason why the masculine role has been falling apart is because, again, a lot of men are no longer accepting this, but there's a hero's journey for them, and there's a dark, dark, dark capacity to what makes men such powerful protectors. And you have to remember that we are monsters deep down, and it would be really easy to avoid this part of ourselves as men. And like I said, nobody's really talking about it, and nobody's really giving it space for it. And now what we're noticing in today's society and what's hurting men is that what men are is a problem. That is exactly the problem. The aggressive nature of men is a problem. What do you think it was? You know when I watched Tarzan as a kid? Because we're going to use Disney films for men too. What do you think is good for men to watch? Tarzan. Why? Well, it's good that you have a little monkey boy in you. What do you think is also good for men to watch? The Incredibles. Well, great film to watch for one reason. He transcends his bachelorette and he has a family and he still has good sex. You guys got to see that in your life. Not everybody has it. And also the other parts of it, which is like typically the starts of all stories, all heroes' journeys. And everybody of any kind of capacity comes from a place where they don't quite understand. Maybe it's the rebel you watch in Treasure Planet. But you know, I'm going to really stick with Tarzan because I think Tarzan's a great idea. You know, little boys are tossed in schools and they're told, hey, here's some, by the way, a really hard drug, Adderall, and this is going to be great. It's going to sit you down. You're going to pay more attention. There's a particular aspect of the male nature that is antagonizing, that is revolting, and it is quite literally all of the Disney films that you've ever watched, that you've ever looked up to, all have a kid that is a rebel in one way or another. And let's get rid of that across the board. So there's a dark nature in men, and I believe that you take the story Tarzan, which is what? An ape man. He's raised by gorillas. The idea of principles don't exist to him. You take Beast and Beauty of the Beast. You know, there's a part of him that has a prince, but right now he's a goddamn monster. What are you going to do about that? When we watch these things, we see that the feminine is relative to the masculine, and the masculine is relative to the feminine, and perhaps maybe we're two halves of the same whole more than our sum total together. That's what needs to be taught. So how does this happen? What does the male journey look like? Well, it's like, one, it's by understanding that your darkness needs to be harnessed. And by the way, why does it need to be harnessed? There's an ideal. I promise you, I've worked with thousands of people, and I could tell you one thing that have made men want to be better. They look at their daughter and they go, she is why I want to be better. It's why I don't want to be this ape man. It's why I don't want to be this slob, or I don't want to be this secret manipulator. I want to be better. I want to be better. So it's quite literally the same thing that makes us feel the most burden is also what sets us free from the burden of our own character and its insufficiencies in the face of the ideal. So we look at the ideal and we really bend our knee to it and we ask ourselves, why do I not feel connected to it? You know, in my life, I could tell you one thing for certain. I could speak as a man. I could tell you that for certain because I am one. Don't have to question that too much. But one of the things that I rejected the most, that I thought I was the most connected to, was fatherhood. I realized that majority of my life I've been taught to conquer women, not protect them. A majority of my life I abandoned that idea of protecting women because most women weren't worth protecting. And I promise you, this is another societal destructive step, which is make women something not worth protecting, and you'll start to see the worst in men. So I started to see the worst in myself and how I'd use others. And of course, there was an opportunity for me to connect to the value in addition to it. Will I still do the right thing? Will I still say the truth? Will I still pursue the highest ideals? And do I truly want this, or do I just want to play around? And you need to ask yourself that question. And I mean this. When you're willing to take the responsibility, take it. If you're not willing, it's still time to grow. You could sharpen your sword, and you could accept that you're not ready, so that you can truly one day become self-aware and accept when you are. Wrapping this up, and I realize that, the masculine is actually going to be the leading force. Again, that's something that a lot of people don't want to say. And that at the end of the day, yes, we are responsible for our daughters and our sons. And I promise you that most women are actually looking for men that can give them that kind of protection that was given to them from a loving father. And of course, not everybody has a beautiful family, so we have to understand how these wounds hurt us. I believe that now more than ever is an opportunity for us to come together. We have to come together as man and woman. We have to start challenging each other and start investigating perhaps maybe that there is the truth here and that there is the right thing for us to do. This isn't about conservative ideals. This is genuinely about what's true about every single man and true about every single woman. And if we don't investigate these things and these parts of ourselves, then how can we be an individual? The only way you create an individual is understanding by all of the imperfect and unideal that you are in the face of the ideal and the things that you're willing to do in order to achieve it. If we are here for anything, and if I promise you this, if there's one thing worth achieving in our lifetime, it's going to be pursuing all of what we believe we can be and giving it 100% of our efforts. If we don't give it our best, and we have never seen that about ourselves, we will look to life with a sense of bitterness, and we will burn down our own homes. And for women, you'll strike a match, cover yourself in oil, and light yourself on fire. And as men, that's all you will see in the world around you. The things that you love hurting themselves until eventually you do the same thing for you. We need to come together here to understand that we are working towards these things. And yes, there's a journey ahead of all of us. And if we can start right now, just to start understanding that you rejecting these archetypes is genuinely what makes you weak. As men, we need strength, and as women, we need strength. But male and female strength are very, very different. When we begin to understand that the strength that we have accumulatively is in the image of God. What we represent can create life. What we are can sustain it, and it can grow it to new heights. And let's try to do that together, with an open heart, with truth, with virtue, and with courage.